Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, the Senior Contributing Editor, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by littleBits. It's titled, Bringing STEAM to Your District or School. And before I introduce our speakers, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded. So in a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us that will contain a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And secondly, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I hope we'll have about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We also have a chat function, which can be launched via the brown group chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or any other concerns for that matter. However, please don't use the chat function to ask the speakers questions. They really won't have time to monitor the chats while they're giving their presentation. If you have a question, please use the Q&A panel instead. And with that out of the way, let me introduce today's speakers. Erin Mulcahy is Head of Strategic Initiatives for Global Education at littleBits. Erin has been with littleBits since 2012 and has been helping educators integrate littleBits into classrooms since the very beginning. Peter McKenna, our second speaker, is a computer teacher in the Scarsdale schools in New York. Peter and his principal developed the Makerspace pilot program at Fox Meadow Elementary School, which is now used in all 5 elementary schools in the district. And our third speaker today is Sergio Anaya, who's Supervisor of Instructional Innovation at Colonial School District in Pennsylvania. Sergio began his career as a social studies teacher and now incorporates STEAM learning concepts across multiple disciplines as a curriculum supervisor. Welcome to all of you. It's an honor to have you here today. Erin, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, Andrew, and welcome everyone to the littleBits Education webinar. So we'll kick it off with a bit of background on what we do at littleBits in the education space, and then I'll pass it over to Peter so he can tell you a bit more about how he's using littleBits in his classroom. So littleBits was founded about 4 years ago now by Aya Badir, who's our CEO and founder. We're a startup based in Manhattan. And our product was created by Aya when she really fused her background in computer science and engineering with her interest in art and design. She attended the MIT Media Lab to further the idea of using littleBits or electronics as a material, and later had really her first big platform to tell people about littleBits through the TED platform, where she later became a senior TED fellow. Since the beginning, littleBits has been part of the maker movement, and we are very much focused on infusing play and making in the process of design and education. So littleBits, we're a mission-driven company. Essentially what we're trying to do is democratize hardware, so making it accessible and adaptable by empowering everyone to create inventions, both large and small, with our platform of easy-to-use electronic building blocks. And so when we talk about electronic building blocks, a lot of the times we hear people compare us to Lego, an electronic Lego, 21st century Lego, and you can see how this is exemplified here. Our whole system contains about 70 modules. Everything is color-coded, and it's snapped together, and they snap together with magnets. And the system is composed of powers, which are blue, outputs, which are green, things like motors and sound and lights, inputs, which control outputs, so those are things like sensors, switches, buttons, and then orange, which are wires or modules that add additional complexity to the system. And everything is compatible, so you can have small circuits or you can have circuits that have multiple modules attached. And so when you combine electronics with other materials, this is really where the magic happens and the possibilities are endless. We have a growing community of educators and people from all around the world who create projects and lessons and post them on our website. And so littleBits, in the very beginning, was, as I mentioned, a tool for designers and tech enthusiasts to infuse electronics and art into what they were making. But at the very beginning, we started to see uptake of littleBits in the classroom, and we were really curious what was happening here. And over the past 4 years, we've really seen it grow in such amazing ways across the K through 12 spectrum. And what we're finding is that littleBits are really a powerful tool for encouraging problem solving and creative confidence and what we like to call the next generation of inventors. And we love this quote from one of our education advisors, Mitch Resnick, where he said, "The best technologies have low floors, so providing easy ways to get started. High ceilings, so supporting complex projects and the ability to increase your knowledge and understanding of a system as you grow. And also wide walls, so appealing to a wide variety of people, but also across a wide variety of disciplines." And so the reality is that not everyone has access to this technology, and not a lot of people understand how technology actually works. When we first started littleBits, the statistic was that people were using technology about 8 hours a day, and this year that number has increased to 11 hours a day. So very few people can look at their cell phone or their TV and actually understand how that works. And not only that, but the barrier to entry of these technical fields is very high. And you need years of schooling and practice to be able to be an accomplished engineer. And so what ends up happening is not only do we have these lack of access to tools, but we also have achievement gaps in STEM, especially with minority groups who don't have the right resources to really move them forward. And so this is really where we see littleBits being a powerful tool in education. By lowering the barrier of entry, we're able to get kids excited about science and technology and really helping them understand how they can prepare for careers that we don't even know exist yet. And it's easy and it's fun, and it encourages kids to not only understand what's happening in the world around them, but to look at a problem and understand how they can provide a unique solution and viewpoint. And may only really be relevant to them or their environment, but it matters. And within this process, they're also developing 21st century skills. And as one of the C's that we like to add is creative confidence, to really understand how they can use their hands and their minds to create solutions. And along with this analogy of the high ceilings, low floors, littleBits modules also map to this idea of building a base. So if you understand simple lights and sensors, lights and sounds, how a light switch works. Then if you add motor and mechanical concepts, you can then build through the spectrum of adding sensors and then creating a gateway to programming through logic gates and actually being able to solder and wire and connect hardware to software through our Arduino module, all the way up through the ability to create your own bits or modules with our hardware development kit to create solutions that we haven't even thought of yet. And this idea of wide walls also spans across the STEM and STEAM spectrum. So you can see how in the elementary level you could create a circuit that helps you explore the electromagnetic spectrum. And Sergio will talk to you a little bit about the social studies unit that he's been working on, bridging the gap between historic inventors and then inventors in your own classroom. Even creative uses of art, creating generative art bots that actually draw for themselves, and you can connect those art lessons to geometry to measure radius and circumference of your circles. And then also math, if you think about the binary system, breaking that down into logic gates or using littleBits to create a new way to think about physics by measuring the acceleration due to gravity. So now from our humble beginnings of just a few teachers, we now have over 9,000 educators using littleBits in over 2,000 schools, 400 universities, and also in informal learning spaces like libraries, makerspaces, and museums. And littleBits are also sold in kits to help you get started. The student set is great for individuals working for choice time activities. So you could have groups of 4 to 8 students working together. The workshop set is ideal for a teacher who wants to run the same lesson or project with their entire class. And the Pro Library is fantastic for larger spaces like libraries or classrooms, where littleBits becomes an organic tool that you don't necessarily have to be teaching a littleBits lesson, but you can use them as a way to problem solve or add engineering or science into your lesson. And we also sell kits individually. The Gizmos and Gadgets kit is our brand new kit that was released today that has everything you need to get started making projects. And we've also done some larger partnerships with NASA and CORE to create the Space Kit and the Sense Kit. And everything you've seen is available on our website. We do offer a 15% discount to educators in both formal and informal spaces. And we've also created these new education bundles, which you can see on our website, littlebits.cc/education programs, that have products and PD rolled into the bundles to create an easy way to get started in your classroom. And Peter and Sergio will tell you a bit more about how they're using littleBits and the products that they're using.
Okay, so hi, this is Peter McKenna. With me is my principal, Duncan Wilson, who will also be speaking to some of our innovations in our Makerspace here at Fox Meadow. Our Makerspace here at Fox Meadow really began with the Scarsdale Center for Innovation, who funded challenge grants for teachers to apply. And one of the first grants was to create a Makerspace at Fox Meadow, and we received the grant and started building our Makerspace. Also, the Scarsdale Education Foundation has helped fund us, gave a grant so that every school could create a Makerspace. All the elementary schools could start building and buying materials for their Makerspace. Our original space was actually a storage closet. Here you'll see in the back of the library. It was in actually a good place to create a Makerspace because it was just off the lab and just off the library, so we could sort of use those 3 spaces together, and we often do for many projects. But it was not used by kids. It was simply a storage room. So here's the Makerspace today with kids using it on a regular basis. We started when the Makerspace was finished in 2013, it sort of began with clubs. So we have after-school clubs, and we were running, getting kids in there for clubs like 3D printing and robotics. So some of our challenges, we're going to talk about growing the space for use for the students and staff. So the biggest challenge last year we asked ourselves were, how can we expose more kids to the Makerspace and the maker mindset? How can we leverage our parents? We have a very educated parent body that we could really use. How are we growing the maker mindset, not just in the space itself, but in every classroom, and what comes next with the whole project? One of the ways we expanded the Makerspace is with pop-up making. So in this slide, you'll see air rockets. So simply, I might or another teacher might just bring out the box of materials to the playground and have a pop-up making session where the kids are basically controlling everything about the project. They've learned how to create the rockets and roll them and tape them and then launch them themselves by pumping air and launching the rockets. So it's just sort of one way we grew the program. Another way is through curriculum integration. These students are part of the Global Economic Challenge that a 5th grade classroom did last year. So they had to create an actual product. So these students created phone cases. This was sponsored by Microsoft. So different, one group made pencil toppers, and so they were making molds. Another group were making posters and cards. So it was really, really, a great integration of the space, but also the maker mindset in the classroom because they were becoming entrepreneurs in the class. Another way we grew the Makerspace and Maker Mindset was to totally overhaul our Colonial Day. Our previous Colonial Day for 4th grade was sort of, we brought people in and they would do workshops, and that was wonderful. But the kids, it was sort of a one-shot deal. The kids didn't really participate in building something and making meaning for themselves other than just the workshop. So now all the 4th graders last year created, did research and found a product and process to, and Colonial, Maker to copy and to learn about and then build their own spinning wheel or printing press or stockade or what have you. This girl's building, she's building a schoolhouse replica. And here is this was a paint mixer that was created with all just simple materials. So it was these sort of low tech but high design, high engineering, just balsa wood, model magic, and the design. So there's the printing press. And of course, they presented to parents and to each other during a presentation day.
So right away, we realized that we would want to look at how we would evaluate this kind of work. And we realized that the making process is about certain dispositions that don't just happen in a makerspace, but really can spread to other parts of the curriculum. So you guys mentioned earlier in an earlier slide, 21st century skills. The 4 that we really keep shooting for across the curriculum are risk-taking and resilience, visualization, applying knowledge to new situations, and collaboration. And so we find that these projects lend themselves well, these challenges, to those dispositions. But teachers will also then use the experiences in the makerspace in a math class or in another setting where they're pushing the kids along those skills and dispositions.
So one of our challenges early on was how do we grow the use of the makerspace, the maker mindset among all the teachers. And some teachers have early buy-in, they're early adopters, and then the other teachers sort of didn't see, what the idea was. As we've been going along, more and more teachers are either sharing among their grade levels or coming up with an idea that they want to try. And this 2nd grade teacher, the kids were reading The Littles, so that's where the little people create their own rooms out of found things. So the kids actually came into the makerspace and, again, sort of low-tech, high-engineering design, created rooms and then that actually would work to live in for little people, even to the point of creating a working bathroom where a shower was spraying water and whatnot. And sort of the greatest quote we heard from that, one of the little girls in that room was, she said, "I feel like I'm in a higher grade," because it was her, she and her partners that were designing and building and figuring it out. So the next slide is a video, and I'm not sure it's going to play right now. It's the integration of littleBits, so I'm sure we're going to come back to it if it doesn't play right now. What it's about is, let's see, it's going to play.
Another switch here, and then let's say that's
So how's the stoplight coming, girls?
great.
Any problems so far?
No. Well, actually, we don't really want the sound.
Well, Holly says that'll help blind people who need to cross the street.
I was saying that they have to go all together. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm making a pattern. So when it's switch, light. Switch, light. And then they'll all be together.
So you see how the students used littleBits to sort of remake their city, which they have done in the past as a very creative make type project with high design. But now they're able to integrate all these stoplights and crosswalks and engineer the process of building them. So another example of sort of a quick pop-up making was a first grade teacher wanted to make counting beads with first grade students, and the kids actually used the inspiration of the beads you see in the pediatrician's office, colorful beads. They came in and they glued their blocks together and used the drill press to drill holes for the wire and used pliers to create the wire itself, and added and counted the beads to create their number rack. And here's a close-up of that. Another second grade teacher was doing storybook. Kids wrote fantasy stories, and then to go along with that, they used found materials and art materials to create a light-up version of their story to go along with the actual book. So obviously this one incorporated some electronics and circuits, and we actually had a parent push in and help us with this as well. Another example of sort of curriculum integration was these are third graders learning about generators. So they read the story of William Kwakwamba, and the book is called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And there's a YouTube video, it's wonderful. And we actually use the windmills to then generate in teams. The kids would change the windmills, the blade size, the blade angle, the blade number, and create the most electricity they could based on the generator. We added some money in there too, so that they actually made the bolts into cents and used that as part of learning about money as well. So it was sort of a soup to nuts, beautiful maker project that really had a lot of different areas.
We also did work in third grade with kids experimenting with bridge building. And actually, if you want to go to the next slide, I think it also was a place for kids to realize that even much at all. They weren't just building
the deck is strong, isn't it?
And the kids found that very exciting. They were also more interested in taking risks that way. And we go to the next slide. And it leads us to one of the big ideas that we have with kids. If you see this diagram about failure, that we really build into this conversation the idea that when you're working on something, you may fail a lot in order to get there, and that's okay. So, we're a slide ahead. Okay. Stalled it a little bit. Let's go there. Okay. There we go. And through our work with the School of Education at Harvard, we've developed this concept of agency that comes through design work. And that's another big idea that fits into the disposition, that we want to have kids see that they live in a designed world and that they can participate in that process. And things like littleBits allow kids to really move in there pretty easily, to look for real-world problems, to understand how their world works, and then to actually interact with that by designing something.
So one of the thinking routines that the Agency by Design has developed is called the Parts, Purposes, and Complexities. And we're using that to introduce many of our maker projects. We've used that to introduce littleBits, where you give the child just one or two littleBits and have them and their partner explore all the parts of that bit, all the purposes of each part, and then finally how those things interact together. And that could be used for small systems and large systems, and it's been really useful for us. So we have several 3D printers, and that is sort of many times an after-school club here. We're trying to build it more into the curriculum, but for us, it's really about the challenges. One of the challenges we did district-wide was a ornament challenge last year, where students in various schools who had access to a 3D printer, created ornaments, and then they were put on display. for the whole district. Here's some examples. We like to actually have the kids use Sharpies to color and design on the 3D prints when they're done. And then also a variety of challenges, like in this slide you'll see bridges. So they had to actually, measure span and have their 3D print be able to make the span. Another way we grew the program at Fox Meadow was to actually remake a lunch program that had been going on for years here, which had been called Whiz Kids. Whiz Kids was parent-run, and it was during the cold weather months when many students are inside. The typical project for Whiz Kids would be to make a fluff snowman out of 3 cotton balls and art materials, and every kid would take it home. So with the parents' help, with a great group of parents here, we remade the program into a STEAM program. Kids and parents sign up on a Google Doc, and any child has access to any of the projects that are offered, some of which included soldering last year as well as robotics and game board making and things like that. To sort of kick that off too, and to build this team power among the parents and staff, we have a luncheon every year, and many times we'll offer up a challenge like Newspaper Bridge. This is the World Newspaper Bridge Challenge, and parents and teachers work together to actually, span the distance with their newspaper bridge, or some other. We've done spaghetti and marshmallow challenge as well. Sort of grow the idea. And then across the 5 elementary schools, and we have 1 middle school and 1 high school, we have teams of people that have received grants from the CFI to actually grow maker spaces, grow the maker mindset. So here's a middle school teacher, 2 elementary teachers from different schools working on developing curriculum that could be used at any of the schools for maker and STEAM growth.
So I think what we hope you notice in the scale of these projects from start to finish, some involving littleBits and some not, is they're not always huge pieces of curriculum. That what we're asking teachers to do, is to look for small places where they feel that they can integrate this. And in some ways, as a leader, what I'm looking at is I need to build the risk-taking and resiliency and prototype thinking of my teachers and the parents as well in order to grow this. And I think that that's where our success will be. I don't envision us ever having sort of a littleBits unit in a grade level, but I think that kind of goes counter to what we're trying to do with the maker movement and how we want to integrate classrooms. It takes time, it takes inspirational people, but it definitely also takes the ability to create spaces where the adults can also take risks and know that that's okay.
So finally, our sort of last way of growing this is to present at many places and to connect with many of you who are interested in this. We invite you to join the School Makerspace's Google Plus community and post and read and enjoy what we do there. So thanks very much. We're going to pass it on to Sergio.
All right, thank you guys very much for having me today. Today I'm going to briefly discuss Colonial School District's STEAM vision and discuss how we've embedded littleBits into our K-5 information technology curriculum. Now, I know that there are a number of definitions of STEAM out there, and this is only Colonial's definition, and this is the direction that we're going. Here at Colonial, we don't see STEAM as an activity. We don't see it as a curriculum. We don't see it as a course. We see it as a philosophy and a culture that we are slowly developing throughout our whole organization. Within that mission, we want to make sure that we're developing students that are, and as Aaron said earlier, we need to be able to prepare students for careers that don't even exist yet. We need to make sure that we're preparing a generation of students for a different type of success. And we need to make sure that our students are innovators, make sure they're problem solvers, they're exposed to real-world situations on a regular basis. And then as a district, we need to make sure that we're providing the proper professional development for our teachers and making sure that there is a solid curriculum there and that we are fostering partnerships with outside organizations and universities. One example of that is we are currently working with Discovery Education to really help us define and develop the STEAM culture that we plan on pushing out to the whole district. And today we're going to focus on our information technology curriculum and how we've basically embedded littleBits throughout our curriculum K-12. Our core curriculum is based on 5 areas of study: coding and programming, digital citizenship, digital storytelling, communication and collaboration, and our creating and designing unit, which you'll see littleBits embedded throughout. One thing that we wanted to make sure that we did when we developed this curriculum is that we wanted to make sure that we built equity into our curriculum. We wanted to make sure that every student, K-12, will have the opportunity to develop and work on skills throughout their time here at Colonial on these 21st century skills that are going to be extremely important for them when they're successful, for them to be successful as they move on with their career. And our curriculum K-5 or K-12, as you can see here, really meets the needs of those students and really provides opportunities for those students to engage in high-level activities and skills. Our scope and sequence in our creating and designing unit, and I have littleBits highlighted throughout this. littleBits plays an important role in a number of our units, and it's a tool that we use throughout the core curriculum. One thing about littleBits, and I believe Aaron said it earlier, littleBits grows with you. And that really came to light for me when I was visiting Drexel's game design lab, and I saw graduate students working with littleBits. And it's that low floor, high ceiling that really allows us to embed littleBits K-12 here in the Colonial School District. And I'm going to show you some examples of how our students are actually interacting with littleBits at those levels. Another reason that we really like littleBits is that they're very compatible with a number of other tools and resources that we use in our curriculum. We're very excited about the Makey bit and seeing what our kids create with that, and we like the fact that we can use the Makey and the Makey bit with Scratch, and Scratch can control Mindstorms. So all of these tools really work together to provide an environment for our students to really create and innovate, as Peter said earlier. I'm going to show you an example of a 3rd grade classroom and what is taking place there as we embed the littleBits into that classroom.
Can I try something?
In their weekly technology classes, children as young as kindergarten are gaining hands-on experience using technology to solve problems.
So what is it that flashes and a buzzer that buzzes and
As part of their creating and designing unit, 3rd graders at Ridge Park Elementary made simple circuits using a product called littleBits. littleBits includes power sources, a variety of switches, and outputs like lights, buzzers, and fans.
So
it's fun to put
maybe we want to just move on. I'm sorry about that, but maybe Christine
The goal is
in the
for students to
background,
better
you could
understand
see if
how
we can get that
electronics
reloaded
work.
for later in the presentation. But Sergio, I would suggest that you move on.
No problem. One of the things that littleBits provides and that our teachers really enjoyed were the task and challenge cards. These task and challenge cards were an excellent way for our teachers and our students to learn all of the components and all of the different features of the littleBits. And this is extremely important for and scaffolding for our teachers and students to move on to the next level. In the video, you would have seen our students working through our engineering and design journal. This engineering and design journal helps our students document and reflect on their learning. It also serves as a tool for our teachers to formally assess the skill level of all of our students as they are working through their projects. Another aspect is that because littleBits are not consumable, and when students use the littleBits, we needed to make sure that we had evidence of what the students were learning and what they created, and that this design journal meets that need. I believe Peter said earlier about the idea of making sure that failure is a part of the process. We've implemented the engineering design process into our curriculum, and a major component to help guide our students, particularly through our creativity and design unit. And the idea of failure as being a key component of that process is extremely important, because we want the students to fail. We want them to revisit, to analyze, what went wrong, and then start the process all over again. So that's a key component and something that we're looking at and we're developing as we implement our curriculum. Also, at the end of every one of our units, we have a number of scaffolded performance tasks. We want to make sure that we are assessing the students at their readiness level. An example of one of those performance tasks, our task number 2 here, it asked our students, it placed them in a scenario, and basically stated that many students are playing on a piece of playground equipment, and this can cause some major issues. Your building principal has asked you to create a simple machine that will make the playground safer and allow equal turns on a piece of equipment. So we were able to give that to a group of students who are ready to tackle that type of problem. And one of the examples, a group of students chose the slide, and they created a prototype that every time a student went down the slide, they'd press a button which indicated a green light that told the students at the other end that they would then be able to slide down. Hopefully the next video works, because when Aaron earlier talked about wide walls, here's an example of how we've embedded littleBits into our Inventions and Innovations unit in our social studies curriculum. Let's see if it works. I think everybody's just getting a black screen again.
In social studies class, 5th graders at Colonial
Sergio, maybe I should tell the audience that
light
even if
there
are some terrific videos that Sergio and Peter and Aaron have wanted to share with you today, which we've had some technical issues over. When we send the email out to you with a recording of the presentation, we will make sure that those videos are operating properly, and so you will be able to see them at that point. But I do apologize at this stage that these great videos are not available right now. So Sergio, please do your best without them, and just encourage you to carry on from there.
Yeah, no problem. So when we talk about high ceilings, one of our engineering courses at the high school had printed a 3D prosthetic for one of our 4th grade students who was born without fingers. The original prosthetic was created. It was a great success. Now those students are using littleBits to prototype and really mechanize this device so that they can build a robotic hand. So that right now is in the works, and how littleBits is helping our higher end students really engage in prototyping and designing and creating various resources that help our students and our community. And with that, that's all I have.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. And as I said, without your videos, you did a great job. And again, I apologize to our audience for not having those available. If you look at the group chat box, and you can load that on that lower toolbar on your console, Christine has loaded links to the various videos that we missed, and I encourage you to click on those when you can and go watch those videos, because I think they will help explain a great deal of what littleBits is doing and what schools are doing with them as well. So we have about 20 minutes without those videos. We have about 20 minutes for questions. So if you have questions, please get them in, and we'll turn over and start asking some of these questions. And Sergio, I'll start with you. You did show how you had integrated components into course content throughout the curriculum, as well as into specific courses. And someone in the audience was wondering. They said that how did you plan to do this? When do you do it? Is it done at the beginning of the year before you've even started? Her complaint was that at her school district, teachers are cramped with a preset curriculum, and that they don't feel they have time to go and do great activities like this. So can you talk about how you actually obtained the freedom and the ability to plan to integrate these things into the course and how you did that?
Well, I'm the curriculum supervisor of innovation and learning, so tech ed, art, computer science, social studies, these are all my areas of supervision, and so it's my job to create core curriculum for these areas and implement them K to 12. And like I said earlier in the previous slide, is we want to make sure that when we build a curriculum, when we build something into the curriculum, we want to make sure that all of our kids have access to it. And we want to make sure that we spiral those skills and those concepts up so that the kids can continue to build on them as they move through higher grades. Our K to 5 core curriculum that's built around those 5 areas of studies, it's in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And to kind of give you an example of the progression, that is a class that all kids have to take in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, all the way through high school. And in kindergarten, in our creating and designing unit, we introduce students to simple circuits via conductive paint and conductive tape. In 1st grade, we introduced them to 3D modeling and 3D printing through the use of the Morphe app. And then they use conductive paint to create a circuit on whatever tool they created. And then in 2nd grade, we introduced them to the Makey and all of the components of having a very complex circuit board and what they can do with that. And then we move them on in 3rd grade to the littleBits, where they are now able to use all the tools that they had used since kindergarten to create and design and apply their knowledge to solve problems that we put them, that we give to them. And then this continues up until 8th grade.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you for explaining that. Peter, I want to turn to you right now. During your presentation, you made reference to a 3-part process. And someone in the audience wanted to see if you could give some examples of how that 3-part process is used.
Okay, the parts, purposes, and complexities. So I may, really many of the things I would introduce, I would do this way now that I've learned it. You know, the B-bots, there's something called B-bots, which are basically coding robots for K2. I would bring a B-bot in now and actually have students, before they even turned it on or ran it or learned anything about it, actually explore it deeply, you know, with their visual, by touching, and just sort of, you know, label and diagram all the parts and what they then think the parts are for. And then as we go on, so some of the purposes, they might switch on the switch and learn that it turns the robot on or turns the sound on. And then finally the complexities as they go on, and we may take a break and actually learn some about the robot, and then they may detail some of the complexities of the robot. So I don't, with the younger students, I don't use the word complexities, I use the word noticings or something like it, so they can start to describe and diagram the different interactions of the parts that they've learned about. And that really, it really extends to any process. You know, you could even look at the Colonial Fair, you could look at democracy, you know, parts of government the same way. So it's a pretty, you know, beautiful thing to use in education.
It's a thought process you can build a lot of lessons around. In, for example, just to take it in a different context, at the beginning of the Colonial Museum project, the kids looked at artifacts the same way and said, what is it made of? What is its purpose? Why would they have used this in colonial times? So you realize that this sort of thought process is something that allows you to really see design thinking or get design thinking going in young minds. When we first experienced it ourselves, Peter and I, it's a great thing to do with adults. We went to Home Depot, got an $8 doorknob, and took the doorknob apart. And you realize that there are all these objects in your world you don't even think about unless you stop and look at what are they made of, what are their parts, what purposes do each of those parts have, and how do those parts interact to serve a function. So it becomes a really powerful tool that teachers can use throughout the curriculum.
And I would direct people to the Agency by Design website because they have many, many resources there, including this process.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to another question, and perhaps we could hear from both Sergio and Peter on this one. Is someone in the audience wants to know how long it took you to integrate this kind of size program into your school and getting everyone on board and bringing the whole thing to fruition. Can you just talk about the time frame and what it took? Why don't we start with you, Sergio?
This has been probably a 2-year process. As we started to build our curriculum and as we started to identify what skills and what we wanted our students to know and be able to do by the end of every year, we then started to look and find the tools that would help our students meet those expectations. And as we identified those tools, we would have to make sure that we provided the proper professional development to our teachers to make sure that they were competent of delivering the curriculum as it is built. So this is an ongoing process. As we find a tool and we integrate into the curriculum, teachers are professionally developed, and we're constantly changing. I've told my teachers that our current curriculum, the way it exists, will not exist 2 years from now, because we will have to change and adapt as new technologies and new resources become available for our students to work with. And that's one of the things that why we love littleBits, is because we can grow with them. And we already see that there are a number of bits that we aren't using at our lower levels, but when our kids get that skill set, we'll be able to introduce those at a later date.
Peter, do you want to comment on this idea of? Sure, go ahead.
Sure. I can only speak for our school. Duncan and I can only speak for our school because it has spread among the other schools, but they're growing at different rates and different times. And we're trying to make connections and and build it that way. But Sergio's comment that it's ongoing is so true. It's ongoing. It will, it's not going to be done. It took us 2 years to build what I showed you in the slides and getting people on board. And I would say that it has to be an organic process, really. I mean, you have to have teachers sort of turned on either through professional development or just exposure to the different ideas and materials themselves. I mean, one of my jobs as a technology teacher is to actually push into classrooms. So by pushing in with littleBits or bbots or what have you, I'm actually growing it with the teachers organically, and then that's spreading among themselves as a grade, and then finally among the schools during grade level meetings. But it's a slow, ongoing process, and you can't rush it because not everybody's going to be on board right away, I would say. Duncan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say we kind of intentionally took a bit of a disruptive approach from traditional curriculum development. For the same reasons that somebody else mentioned, our teachers feel that they are chock-a-block full of content to deliver to the kids. So if our end goal is to really work on those 4 dispositions we mentioned, we want to grow it that way. So we're not necessarily going to have a curriculum for this or that. So that's one way in, and the other way in is as the dispositions grow, you do start to see people saying, hey, we should just be doing this in this unit or that unit. So then we start to look at places within the science units and things where we can start to knock those off. And I think that that's kind of the next stage we're going into is what we kind of call curriculum makeovers. When you change the way people are thinking, they'll suddenly start to make over their curriculum to match that thinking. So we're kind of starting at a different point, but I think we have the same goals in mind.
You addressed this idea of trying to make all of this fit and some of the concerns surrounding that. And looking at some of the audience questions coming in, there is definitely this idea that teachers have to achieve a certain amount, and what do they have to maybe give up in order to fit this component into their day and their week and their month and their year. As you have put these programs in place, have you felt like you've had to give anything up in order to put this in place? Sergio, why don't we start with you?
We didn't have to give anything up because this is a part of our core curriculum. So what we're seeing is that when the students build their skill set in Scratch, they're then using that when they're doing a presentation in their social studies class or in their science class. They're actually seeing the opposite, that we're building the skill set in our technology classes and our students are using that skill set in their core academic classes.
Did you want to comment on that?
Well, I would agree with Sergio that the skill set transfers. I mean, I'm a big fan of Scratch as well, and I believe it really does transfer in so many ways to other skills. Yeah, Duncan, you
I'm just looking at the question. I think you're right that you have to plan some of your professional development alongside these changes. But oftentimes, we do a lot of weekend workshops with teachers who are interested, and we often try to set those up with saying, hey, we're showing you something, but we want you to bring in an idea of the piece of curriculum you're going to adapt. So we use that makeover concept a great deal, so that a teacher feels that he or she has permission not to just add something, but to replace. So I think that giving up question is not there, but I would say that that's where the resistance is, because if someone doesn't have that vision, they feel that they can't give something up and do that. And that's sometimes where leadership comes in, and you have to ask them to reimagine, which may mean giving up a piece of a project or something that they love. But part of what we're pushing teachers to do is not fall in love with the project, but hopefully fall in love with the goal that we're trying to achieve in terms of the skills. And for some teachers that's harder than others, but I think as they see others doing it, they'll also want to jump onto another successful idea. So success breeds success.
Okay. Well, let's think. I just want to stay with that for a second. You mentioned professional development, and can you talk a little bit about the reaction of teachers to littleBits and what you were asking of them, and what kind of training was required? And can you just talk a little bit about that professional development side of things?
You want me to start?
Sure.
So when we started to modernize our curriculum, our old technology teachers were teaching things like keyboarding and very, very low-level type skills that weren't very dynamic and weren't very interesting. So we did have a lot of pushback from our teachers when we first started this project. But as we developed the curriculum and we refined it and we brought in the littleBits and we created the performance tasks, what the teachers found was that because a lot of the activities that we do and a lot of the assessments are student-centered, they didn't really have to learn a lot of the technology because the kids figured it out, and that's what we want. The kids were doing more of the work, not the teachers, and the teachers were just there as guides, and because we had a solid curriculum, they could guide the students through the activities and the curriculum. But we really wanted to see the students engage in it, and that's what we're really seeing as a byproduct, is we want to see what the students create. I tell them after every unit, I want to see product. I want to see what the students created and what they developed. But the professional development part, there was some resistance, but the teachers are on board.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for clarifying on that issue. Let's shift to another area that often becomes a heated discussion, and that is finding the resources and the funds to support a program like this. How did you, Sergio, coming back to you, what was your approach in securing the funds for the program? Did you have to prioritize in certain ways? What was left on the cutting board, or how did you justify the expense?
Well, as the curriculum supervisor of a number of different areas, I basically just took my social studies budget and my other budgets and really invested heavily to these technologies and to this core curriculum because I believe that these are the skills that kids need to be successful. And my superintendent and my director, of course, were a little skeptical, but now they're seeing the results of that curriculum and they're seeing what the kids are creating, and so now they're believers. It wasn't easy at first. Trying to push those POs through was kind of tough, but it was all worth it to where we're at currently.
Okay. Now, Erin, you obviously deal with, Erin, you obviously deal with a lot of schools and school districts on a regular basis. Can you talk a little bit about, the conversations you've had with them about finding the budget for this?
Sure. A lot of the times we see individual teachers, at least in the beginning at least, pushing for small amounts of bits to be incorporated into their classroom. And then the movement really grows from there where, other teachers are peeking in and saying, hey, my kids, your kids just came to my class and they've been raving about what they just made. What are you up to? And then it really becomes this momentum that bubbles up to the administrators. But now we're also working more at the top-down level where we're helping schools understand what products make sense at a larger scale. And as part of that initiative, we've been growing our PD course, which, as I said, will be available in November, which will be a great way to incorporate STEM into the classroom. And it's geared for that educators who may not have a background in making or understand how STEM can be applied to their own classroom. So as far as budgets, it's absolutely, case by case, but if we do see some teachers using Donors Choose and Adopt a Classroom, there's also grant opportunities. Another way that we see the money is being stretched is if you have a shared classroom set that can go between classrooms in a mobile makerspace. So that's also another great idea.
Okay. And Erin, let's just stick with you for just one other follow-up is, given that you're meeting with a lot of schools and school districts, when you first sit down with them, what are the concerns and challenges that they're bringing to you, and with those challenges, what is your response to? How do you deal with those?
One of the challenges I hear often is, well, first of all, it's a technology that's completely new to most people, so it's getting a comfort level with the materials is really important before they introduce them into the classroom. But what we find is actually kids are the best teachers in the situation. Once they understand the basics, they will push the limits of what's possible. And we often advise using the 3 before me rule. So ask your peers, look up information on the project booklet or online, and usually they can find the answer. Another issue we hear often is, isn't this going to be messy or hard to organize? But teachers have found their own solutions, whether it's color coding or creating a protocol when they first introduce littleBits so the kids understand where to put away their bits or who to ask if one of the modules isn't working. Another great resource we have, too, is the Educator's Guide. We've addressed a lot of these questions and concerns, and that is available on our resources page on our education site.
Okay. All right, great. And we probably have a couple minutes left, and so maybe we could hear from each of you in turn. We'll start with Sergio and then go to Peter and then finish with Erin. For schools that are just getting started, would you recommend particular kits to start with, to get your feet wet with, or how would you approach getting into this? Sergio, why don't we start with you?
I would really push the Pro Library. We have 7 Pro libraries throughout our various labs, but then when I purchased the classroom packs for my 5th grade teachers, what we found was that because kids knew that there were other bits out there, they wanted to build and create various things that the classroom teacher didn't have. So I would spend the money on the Pro Kit and make sure you have all the bits available for the students to really push the envelope.
Okay, great. Peter?
Sure. Well, I have the Pro Kit for the wall now, so I'm very happy about that. But we started with the starter kit. And I wanted to say one way we grew our professional development was actually we have a co-teaching model for technology. So when teachers come to the lab or even come to the Makerspace, I'm with them. So what we did was I knew littleBits very well, so I co-taught with them being the leader, and then they became very familiar and comfortable with using littleBits and some of our other technology. So that's a really good model. I know it's not always possible to have that, but that's our model. And then finally, the synth kits are wonderful, and we're actually working with our music teachers to under a grant to develop synth kits and using the Makey Makeys to make interactive art, you know, with the Makey Makeys and drawing and art and the synth kits as well, sampling some of the sounds that come from them. But the starter kit is wonderful. Just, you know, I think when people see it, it's so engaging, and it's so obvious how great it is. So just start with that.
Okay. Erin, did you have anything to add?
If you're new to littleBits, I love the workshop set because you do have 8 sets of 20 different modules, so the kids can have a great sense of how to get started and have the ability to build out in complexity, but you can run the same lesson or project all at the same time. You should also check out our education programs page. We have products that we created with feedback and input from educators on what works based on the space that they have and the amount of students that they're working with. So for example, if you have a central location like a library or a central classroom where the bits will be used, we have an invention lab where there's a pro library, and then you also have individual kits that include the space kit, the synth kit, and some of our smaller collections. And those also come with support materials like our educator guide and also a book that Aya wrote about littleBits.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I mean, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have left today. I want to apologize to everyone again about the videos. There were 3 videos that we planned to show you today, and none of them worked. However, they will be when we send out the email in a couple of days to you with the recording, we will have those links to those videos in there, and I encourage you to watch those. And you will be able to download the slides and hear a recording of what we did today. If we didn't get to your question, please, I put an email address up there on the screen. Please send your questions to that address, and someone from littleBits will follow up with you. So as we wrap up today, I want to thank Erin Mulcahy and Peter McKenna and Sergio Anaya for their excellent presentations. And I also like to thank littleBits for its support. And as one final reminder, we will be sending out that email with links to the recording, the links to the videos, and the ability to download them. So thank you. This concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.